As you could tell this evening, part of what we accomplished was contentious. I would recommend that you all read the two reports that were produced by the Ways and Means Committee and the Joint Committee on Taxation. For all practical purposes, the research that was done as it relates to the mandatory audit program was non-existent. The tax forms were really never audited, and only my sending a letter at one point prompted sort of a rearview mirror response. I emphasize again that the mandatory program, as highlighted in what you will likely get in the next few minutes or so, it was almost non-existent. And my point is that that was the legislative purpose with which we won 4 federal court decisions in 3 courts. We argued for an examination of how the audit process played out. Once staff went to visit the IRS, and once staff had a chance to go to some of the other locations that are within the jurisdiction of the IRS, they quickly concluded that, in fact, the audit did not occur. There were no audits in a timely manner. And that goes, I think, for 2017, 2018, and 2019. As I noted, we made it through those substantial court decisions. It required patience. Let me say something because I think it bears a personal note. This was never about being punitive. It was never about being malicious. I never overpromised. I never built an unreasonable level of expectation. And time and again, I refrained from the questions in the hallway that you posed to me because I was not about to upset a very sensitive court case. The other thing that happened, much to your dislike, was that there were no leaks that occurred from the committee. We kept this very much above board, went back and forth with the attorneys at the committee, and we were determined to put forward a case that would, as I noted early on when I was asked in the hallway right after my letter originally was sent, I was asked, what do you expect? And I said, a long and grueling court case. That was my quote 3.5 years ago. That's what happened. Did we have enough time to conduct the review? Yes, we did. These were individuals on the tax staff who are seasoned professionals, tax lawyers and accountants. They proceeded as I knew they would, with not only great professionalism, but also with great restraint, not to overdo anything as they undertook their responsibilities. When Republicans argue, and I want to hear from the others here, when Republicans argue that there was no precedent, there is a letter from Richard Nixon on December 13th of 1973 to the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Wilbur Mills. And he asked Wilbur Mills to have the Joint Committee on Taxation review his tax returns. It began that very day. This idea that this never happened before, well, 49 years ago, it did happen.
The House Ways and Means Committee has just voted along party lines to approve the release of 6 years of Donald Trump's tax returns after a legal battle that's gone all the way to the Supreme Court and has lasted years. Now, the tax returns won't immediately be public. The staff will now go through and redact sensitive information. But Richard Neal, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, says that it's, quote, going to take a few days. And I don't anticipate too slow of a timeline, given that there are only about 2 weeks left with this Congress before Republicans take over the House. And so you can probably rest assured that this process is going to move pretty quickly. What's especially striking here is that we have learned that Trump was not under audit during the first 2 years of his presidency, even though he said that he was. The agency began an audit only after the chairman of the committee, Richard Neal, requested Trump's taxes in 2019, which makes this quite the falsehood by Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
I have one question, but I need to clarify something that you had said from the podium here on taxes. You said, I think to Matt on Tuesday, that as long as his taxes are under audit, he's not going to release them. His 2016 taxes, to our knowledge, are not under audit, unless they are. Can you
my understanding, and I will double check, but the president's taxes, no matter who the president is, actually immediately go under audit after being filed. So that's actually inaccurate.
Back to us
but I'll double check to be 100% sure.
Who would have guessed that Sarah Huckabee Sanders would be capable of lying? Yeah, I can't even finish that sentence. Now, so as not to bury the lead here, here's why this is especially important. There is an ongoing investigation in New York, both civil and criminal, with Letitia James and Alvin Bragg that seek to investigate whether Trump had committed tax fraud and misrepresented himself and his business. And I would imagine that with Trump's tax returns now being released, Letitia James and Alvin Bragg are going to be the first and second people in line to get their hands on those documents, which will assist in their investigations into Donald Trump. And of course, Republicans are already fear-mongering about what this will mean moving forward. Here's Kevin Brady, the Republican ranking member on the Ways and Means Committee.
Going forward, the majority chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee will have nearly unlimited power to target and make public the tax returns of private citizens. And not just private citizens, political enemies, business and labor leaders, or even the returns of Supreme Court justices themselves. No party in Congress should have that power.
Right. Imagine the precedent that this will set. First, they release Donald Trump's tax returns. What's next? We see the tax returns of every single other president in our lifetimes? Sorry, what? Oh. And of course, since that talking point won't work because all presidents do release their tax returns, Republicans have begun claiming that this slippery slope will mean that anyone's taxes can get released. Right, I'm sure Jim and Mary out there in South Dakota are worried that the entire federal government is going to go to war to get their tax returns released. I'm sure every American out there is worried that it's Trump's first and then them second. If you're looking for a party with its finger on the pulse of the average American, it's the GOP. Also, the government does have access to your taxes. The IRS can see them whenever they want to, and they can audit you. Your taxes aren't hidden, they're subject to audit at any time. And I would humbly suggest that a good way not to worry about your taxes is to just not commit fraud. This isn't rocket science, people. If you don't break the law, you've got nothing to worry about. But either way, let's not pretend that your taxes are somehow locked away in some vault away from the government when they're literally submitted to the government. And finally, on this whole idea of the slippery slope, this should be a slippery slope when it comes to presidents. In fact, all presidents should release their tax returns. Call me a big government leftist, but I'm of the mind that if someone is leading our country, we should probably have some idea about where his or her business interests lie. If a president is going to lead this country, we should know if their decisions are being made in the interest of the American people or of their own bank account. That Republicans are, for some reason, against knowing that goes to show that they're not actually concerned about what's in the interest of Americans. What it does show, though, is that Republicans are willing to sacrifice our national security in deference to their leader. If Trump was a Democrat, I would bet both of my arms that they would demand full transparency into his financial background for exactly the reasons I laid out. But because they've sacrificed any semblance of transparency and good governance in favor of blind deference to the guy, they're now actually trying to help him keep these records private. They've tried helping him hide this information from the public, information that would only be an issue if he is doing something nefarious. Otherwise, he'd have nothing to worry about. Meaning that they are just as complicit as Trump is in risking our national security because their only guiding light is bending the knee to the guy who lost them the last 3 elections. But hey, definitely not a cult. So from here, I hope that Congress does its job and introduces and passes legislation that would require all presidents, at a bare minimum, to release their tax returns. And I would hope that Republicans, who clutched their pearls for years about Hillary's emails and the purported national security threat that those emails posed, would also support knowing whether someone has business or financial interests that would prevent them from acting in the best interest of the people that they're supposed to be serving. Unless, of course, they didn't actually care about national security and were just using that issue as a cudgel to attack Hillary Clinton, but that couldn't possibly be the case. And in the meantime, we should probably be on the lookout for an impending meltdown from Donald Trump, whose taxes will soon be revealed. And while I would say that he's got nothing to worry about if he did nothing wrong, something tells me he's going to be doing a little bit of worrying. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.